The Propagation of the Gospel. 27. The Revelation of John. The book of Revelation was written by John, a brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, to some of those to whom he wrote, who was also under banishment to the island of Patmos for his adherence to Christ. Certain German critics and others have denied that this was the Apostle John, and, well, maybe Paul's buddy, but science has pretty much proven that that's not the case. But we can also say that this is a rewrite, the worst in literary terms, book in the Bible, of an Aramea text written by Barabbas before he got killed, next to his two buddies. And obviously it's in the Christian tone with this, or perhaps that was the model for it, to give the benefit of the doubt. The chief ground of this denial is the difference of style, but insofar as it exists, is readily so accounted for in the vastly and radically different character of the subjects. A simple narrative of events readily conceived by anyone, or a letter to familiar friends on topics concerning which they were accustomed to converse, would not demand a style like the stupendous and astonishing visions and utterances which the writer of the book of Revelations was called upon to record. And the book sounds, by literary style, I mean the English and some other languages is so much better written. Besides, a careful examination will reveal not a difference, but a striking similarity of style in the simple narrative parts of the book, as compared with the fourth gospel and the epistles. This, taken with the almost unanimous traditions of early Christian centuries, secure the majority of authoritative suffrages in favor of the Apostle John as the writer. It's written in the same decade. Rewritten, have 666 instead of 616, and I don't know what other changes really, but it's written in the same decade as the Gospel of John, which is also rewrite of a text about Bacchus, but that doesn't prove it was someone who knew Jesus, no matter how much it's been repeated in church. And some of these doctrines weren't passed on until the 400s or the 600s or something, and people don't remember that, or there's no record of them before that, but they've been repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. As to its state, the authorities are more nearly equally divided. Many names of great weight are found in favor of the opinion that it was written in the time of Nero and not long after the death of Paul. The main reason for this early date is the belief that much of the prophetical part of the book was fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem and the life and death of Nero. This belief being founded on the intimation that the things here revealed would shortly come to pass. 1:1. See also 22, 6, 7, 10, 12, 20. But a number of weighty facts and circumstances militate against this. In the first place, there is the nearly unanimous voice of the fathers and of those nearest John's time who assign a latter date. And that's also one of the issues that we come across here, is that not only is it clear if you know symbolic thinking, speaking regarding some of these things that were going on at the time, and you realize that apocryphal literature, it can say stuff about the past and the future in it, but this idea that this is the last generation. So all the time, ever since this, there's been people, well, not all the time, technically, I guess you could say, but certainly in every generation, it's reinterpreted to somehow make that statement true. Well, make it out to be true. Then there is the fact that the expression of the Lord's Day for Sunday did not begin to be used till near the end of the first century. In the third place, the condition of some of the churches could not have been so early as is represented. Finally, the fulfilled prophecies of the Bible, it would seem, should be more obvious in order for the edification of believers. These and similar considerations furnish weighty reasons for believing that the book was written by John the Apostle during the reign of the Emperor Domitian. Yeah, that would be how you say it. Domitian, under whom the second fierce prosecution of Christians occurred, and in which John had been banished to the island of Patmos. The contents of the book may be loosely grouped as follows. After the title of the book, 1 through 3, and the salutation to the seven churches, the writer sets forth his fundamental idea of Jesus Christ as the central figure and power in the government of the world. 5 through 8 of 1. There is the vision of the 7 golden candlesticks with the Son of Man in the midst of them, whom he describes. 9 through 20. Are they talking about the archangels? And who dictates the message? The Ameshaspentas, or whatever you're going to call them. Who dictates the messages which are to be sent to the 7 churches in Asia, and of which John seems to have had the general supervision. 2:1, 3:22. Then comes the second vision, that of the throne of God, the slain lamb opening the otherwise insoluble 7 seals of the book, which as they are severally opened, furnish each its appropriate revelation. 4:1, 8:1. Next is the vision of the 7 angels with trumpets, the sounding of which in order is the signal of successive judgments. 8:2 through 11:19. A series of visions of varied character. The woman and the child persecuted by the dragon and protected by divine power. 12. The living creature with 7 heads and 10 horns, persecuting the people of God, and a 2-horned beast of the same spirit and having a mystical number. Chapter 13. The Lamb and the 144,000 who celebrate his praises. Could it be like how Islam talks about at least that many messenger prophets being sent to humanity? The angels proclaiming the fall of Babylon, blessing the faithful dead, and pronouncing the doom of the wicked. The harvest, chapter 16. The saints who had overcome the beast sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. They talk. that's another place where you find a little bit of difference when you talk about Islam, is that the beast of the sea, so the inner beast, is dealt with before the outer beast. Well, I mean, you deal with the other, but yeah. The seven angels pour out the seven vials of divine wrath upon the several objects of it. 15 and 16, the harlot sitting on the scarlet beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, a great and wicked city on 7 hills and controlling many things, the destruction of the city and evil power. 17, 18, the triumph of the Lamb, Satan bound for 1,000 years, his release at the termination of this period and vain attempt to regain his power, his final destruction and resurrection of the dead and general judgment with the new heaven and the new earth. 21, verse 1, the description of the eternal city and injunctions to the prophet. The interpretations of this book have been almost as various as the commentators. Well, that's a little bit overstating it, but it's not too far off, especially when a lot of people talk about allegories without knowing the symbolic language or knowing the wider context of the book that they're commenting on, and being careful to keep it within those contexts. It is more than probable that the time for its complete interpretation, or the interpretation of any considerable part of it, has not yet to come. The Bible was written not only for all men in all nations and conditions, but also for all generations and all time. Why does it have Jesus say he came to save the lost of Israel, and that he wasn't, and others talking about an international prophet, but it wasn't quite the time for that? And why isn't the Bible preserved if that was the case? Much that would not be explicable or applicable to one class or in one age may be clear and well suited to another. It is more than probable that, as in past progress of the world, new truth has been constantly appearing in the Bible, which no preceding age had discovered. So it may be in the future that many passages which are now partially sealed to us will be clearly understood by those who come after us. There's also different psychological types, different material culture, where you can have multiple people be right, but contradictions and other issues are not really the thing. But this does not necessarily imply that any part of the divine word is useless to any generation. Even some of its obscurest parts have been lessons of instruction to all who prayerfully study them. So, this wonderful and mysterious book of the Revelation conveys everywhere to the devout soul intimations of the power and wisdom and perpetual providence of God. By whom was the book written? What are the reasons against and in favor of the opinion that this was John the Apostle? What was the difference of opinion as to its date, the grounds of each opinion, to whom was the book addressed or dictated? Chapter 1, verse 4. What is the fundamental idea of the book? 5 and 6, and the introduction. The locality of the 7 churches. What is meant by Asia? Yeah, it wasn't the wider term that it was at their point. I think Europe was a wider term than Asia. Well, I mean, actually, we already pointed that that's true, but the term Europe could have been considered closer to the continent, as we say it. Give the subjects of the first 2 divisions of the book. Take up severally the messages to the 7 churches and give in order the following particulars concerning each: what is commended, what is censured, what is enjoined, what is promised, 2. The overcomers. What is the subject of the third division? How is Christ represented in chapter 5, verse 5? How in verse 6? What is the subject of the song of praise? 9 and 10, verses. What followed the opening of the first 5 seals severally? What followed the opening of the first 5 seals severally? 6, 1 through 11. What extraordinary events consequent upon opening of the 6th seal? 12 through 17. What other important transaction during this period? 7, 2 and 3. How many of each tribe and in the aggregate of the Old Covenant people were sealed? 4 through 8. Did these compromise all the glorified? Verse 9. What had been the previous experience of these? 13 and 14. Their glorified experience. 15 through 17. What flowed? What allowed the breaking of the 7th seal? Chapter 8, verse 1. What series of events compromised the 4th division? What events in order followed the sounding of the first 4 trumpets? 8, 2 through 13. What terrible commotions were consequent on the sounding of the 5th trumpet? 9, 1 through 12. What would be the condition of the wicked men in this period? 5 and 6. The sequence of the sounding of the 6th trumpet, its effect on men. 14 through 18. Did the survivors repent? 20 and 21. The final grand and awful catastrophe declared. Chapter 10, verse 1, 5, 6, and 7. Was this to take place in this period or in the next? The sounding of the 7th trumpet, chapter 11, 15 through 19, mentioned some of the more conspicuous of the visions comprising the 5th division. What moral characteristics are embodied throughout in the dragon, the beast, with many heads and many horns, and in the notable woman arrayed in purple and scarlet? What is always in antagonism with them, and finally overcomes them? 12, 7 through 11, 13, verses 7 and 8, 14, verses 9 and 10, and so on. What is the character of ancient Babylon? See the Old Testament prophets. Could these predictions apply to it? What then must have been the character of the power or agency designed by this name here? What are some of the things said of it? What was to be its fate? 14, 8, 16, 19, 17, 5, and 18, and 18. What is the subject of the song of the glorified in view of the judgments before described? 19, 1 through 8. What judgment of Satan is spoken of? 20, 1 through 3. What side was this to be final? Verse 7. Was the final doom? 10. How is the general resurrection and judgment described? 11 through 15. What are some of the characteristics of the heavenly judgment? Chapters 21 and 22.